أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على النبي الأمي العربي القرشي المكي المدني الهاشمي صاحب قاب قوسين محبوب رب المشرقين والمغربين جد الحسن والحسين النبي الحرمين والإمام القبلتين والرسول الثقلين الذين سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد صلى الله عليه محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين للتراب مقدمه الفداء واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وآت ذي القربى حقه صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. For the honor and greatness of the Holy Messenger of Allah, can we have a second salawat? Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And for the hastening of the reappearance of our awaited Saviour, can we have a third salawat in your loudest voices? Salli ala Muhammad. The case of Fadak is a particularly important one in the history of Islam. So I've chosen for our discussion this evening because there are some misconceptions, misunderstandings with regards to the concept, with regards to what happened, and with regards to who happens to be correct in this matter. So what we're going to do is divide the discussion into several parts so it's easier for us to analyze the issue. So first of all, we're going to look at the history of this place which is called Fadak. We're going to find out what it actually is, where does it come from, where does it exist, and what is its relationship with the Holy Prophet of Islam. Then we're going to find out what did the Holy Prophet of Islam do in order to receive it, and then what did he do with it, who did he give it to. Then after the Holy Prophet of Islam's life, we're going to look for what happened after the Holy Prophet of Islam, who took control of it, what reasons they gave for taking control over it. And then we're going to look at the case that was presented and the two sides, the two parties in this case, and what they presented as far as evidence in terms of proof of ownership. And finally, we'll look at the relevance of this particular case for Islamic law, for our current day issues, how does it relate to us in the present day, and what happened to Fadak and its journey after this particular case up until the present day. And in doing so, we will be able to receive a better understanding of this particular very important historical matter, which we will, in the course of this discussion, be able to identify whether this was a political matter, a religious matter, or something that affects each and every one of us as far as practicing Muslims is concerned. So first of all, the history of this particular place. The estate or the orchards of Fadak existed at the time some 70 miles outside of the holy city of Medina, and its history is extremely ancient, because the first person to inhabit that part of the land was the grandson of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, who was called Fadak, and after him this land has been named. When the Holy Prophet of Islam went on the expedition towards Khaybar, some distance from the land of Fadak, the battle is very famous, everybody knows what took place there. Once the battle had been concluded and the biggest fort in Khaybar, which was called Qamus, had been captured by the Muslims, the surrounding areas and the people who lived in the surrounding areas realized that when the biggest fort in the area has been captured and it has been taken over by the Muslims, then we don't really have much chance. So they voluntarily came towards the Holy Prophet of Islam, these different groups of people who lived around the area in Khaybar. They voluntarily came towards the Holy Prophet of Islam and they said, we don't want to engage in any fighting with you. So on our behalf, without any fighting and without any warfare, we're presenting these orchards to you. Islamic law has various different categories for the distribution of the wealth that the Holy Prophet of Islam acquires. One of them is called ghanima. That wealth that the Holy Prophet of Islam acquires after having fought a battle is the wealth that all Muslims, all of those people who have participated in that battle, even if they just went and they did not engage in any fighting, they are all entitled to a part of that wealth, just for being participants in the battle. However, if there is land which the Holy Prophet of Islam, or any kind of wealth that the Holy Prophet of Islam receives, but no fighting has taken place, so no battles have taken place, no Muslims have fought in order to take control of this. In that situation, in that scenario, that is called not ghanima, but it's called fay. And Islamic law is very clear that the difference between ghanima and fay is that ghanima, all Muslims, all of those people who participated in the battle have an entitlement over. They are entitled to a part of that wealth. But as far as fay is concerned, nobody is entitled to anything. The Holy Prophet of Islam has complete 100% authority over that wealth that he's received, and he can do whatever he wants with it. He can give it to whomsoever he wants, and no Muslims will have a share in that piece of land, or in that wealth, or in that property, whatever it may be. This is the difference between ghanima and with fay. So when battles took place and ghanima was collected, the Holy Prophet of Islam would distribute it amongst the Muslims. However, when these people came towards the Holy Prophet of Islam after the conclusion of the Battle of Khaybar, and they presented to him the orchards of Fadak without any fighting, this comes under the category of fay. And the Holy Prophet of Islam has a complete, total entitlement over this land and what he chooses to do with it. So as a result, or as a consequence, the Holy Prophet of Islam is in possession of this, or these orchards which are called Fadak, which are the orchards which are built on a land which is known as Fadak. Now what's the value of Fadak? The value of Fadak is that it has a vast majority of date palms, and the annual revenue of these orchards is 40,000 dirhams. In today's currency, it would translate to millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. And we'll come to that in just a second as how I've made this calculation. But 40,000 dirhams, which in today's currency would translate to millions of dollars. So it's clearly a very valuable estate. It's a very valuable orchard if it translates to that much income every single year. The Holy Prophet of Islam has received a very clear commandment in the Holy Quran, a general commandment, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks a rhetorical question. He says, هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ. Is there any return for a favor other than a favor? Is there anything that you can do other than a favor that will be a return for a favor? Which means that if the Holy Prophet of Islam has had anybody do a favor upon him, it is his responsibility, in accordance with the very general command in the Holy Quran, to make sure that he fulfills that favor with another one. It is very well known, in fact it doesn't need to be repeated, that the two people that the Holy Prophet of Islam owed the most favor to in the beginning of the religion of Islam, the first one was Abu Talib, and the second one was Khadija. Peace and blessings be upon both of them. So as far as the favor that Abu Talib alayhi salam had upon the Holy Prophet of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns it in various ways. But as far as the favor that Khadijatul Kubra alayha salatu wasalam, for all the wealth that she spent on the religion of Islam, has upon the Holy Prophet, it still remains. So the Holy Prophet of Islam, in return for the favor that Khadijatul Kubra salamullah alayha has done on the religion of Islam, gifts the orchards of Fadak to the daughter of Khadijatul Kubra, Fatimatul Zahra salamullah alayha. Yasa salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this was a general command about ihsan, about favors. The Holy Prophet of Islam receives a very specific command as well. And indeed, this is one of the verses which Mufassirin of the Holy Quran say has been revealed exclusively for Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. There is verse number 26 of Surah Al-Isra, Surah number 17, also known as Bani Israel, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, which I recited in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and give to your nearest kin their due, haqquhu, their right. And when this verse was revealed, the Holy Prophet of Islam said to Jibreel, what should I give and who should I give it to? And Jibreel says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you should give the estate of Fadak to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. You should give the estate of Fadak to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. That this verse of the Holy Quran, which is mentioned twice, in fact, in the Holy Quran, once in Surah Al-Isra and once in Surah Al-Rum. And the first part of the verse is saying, give to your nearest one their right. Now, qurba in the Arabic language refers to not just the nearest person, but the nearest female. And there is no nearer female to the Holy Prophet of Islam than Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. So the Holy Prophet of Islam, in accordance with this command, both the general command and the specific command in this holy verse, gives the estate of Fadak, the orchards of Fadak, to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. And this remains in her possession up until the Holy Prophet of Islam passes away. So now what happens? Now this is the history of Fadak and how it comes into fruition, how the Holy Prophet Islam receives it, and how it comes in the possession of Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. But now the question is of Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha versus the state. That when the Holy Prophet of Islam passes away and the estate of Fadak is being managed by a person whom Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha has appointed, that as soon as the Holy Prophet of Islam passes away, this person is removed from his place and he's told to go home. So he comes to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha and he tells her that this is what has happened. I have been asked to leave. So Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha goes towards the masjid of the Holy Prophet to present her case for Fadak. Now in this particular issue, in this particular case of Fadak, and the way that Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha goes to present it, there might be certain questions which arise in the way that she presents it and the uniqueness of this action, which we'll address one by one. But before we do that, let's look at the importance of the estate of Fadak, which, as I said earlier, the revenue of which accounts to, in today's currency, in millions of dollars. Amir al-Mu'mineen in one of his sermons says that from all of the dunya, from everything in the dunya, every worldly possession, we didn't have anything except for Fadak. From all the worldly possessions in all of the world, we didn't have any of these things. And the only thing we had was Fadak. And the Muslims took that away from us. The Holy Prophet of Islam had given this to Fatima Zahra based on what? Based on, number one, this order that he receives from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fulfill his right to his nearest relatives. But also on a very practical level. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and Fatima Zahra, peace and blessings be upon them both, used to take care of a number of extremely poor people in Medina. And of course they had no other source of income. So the Holy Prophet of Islam had given this to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha in order to feed both their own families and to feed those people that they used to support. However, once the Holy Prophet of Islam passes away and the plan that had been hatched for Khilafat has come to its completion, the people involved in this plan say to each other, they discuss with one another, that we have managed to take over the government. We've managed to take over the rulership after the Holy Prophet of Islam. However, as every single government knows, where is the money going to come from? How are we going to feed the army? And how are we going to run the day-to-day affairs of the state? So, they bring forth this suggestion that the way we can do this is to usurp the land of Fadak, and that will be enough. This comes back to what I said earlier. In today's currency, millions of dollars will be enough to not only feed our armies, but enough to run the government for years to come. The revenue that will be generated from Fadak will be enough to run the government for years to come. So they take it over. Now there has to be a justification, there has to be a reasoning of why have you just taken over something that doesn't belong to you. So when Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha presents herself in the masjid of the Holy Prophet in order to question why such behavior has taken place, they mention a hadith of the Holy Prophet. Hadith, quote unquote. That the Holy Prophet of Islam allegedly said that we prophets, neither are we inheritors, nor do we leave behind inheritance. Everything that we have is sadaqah. Everything that we leave behind is sadaqah, is charity. Now the first question that any person who's reading the story, happens to read this case, is going to ask, that if there's a matter that relates to my household, to my family, to my own relatives, then it is only reasonable to expect that I'm going to tell them about it. I'm going to tell them that this is a matter which relates to my own family, my own relatives, my own blood, so that they know about it. Instead, what do we see? We see that the own blood relative has come to ask for the question, and somebody, a third party, someone from outside the house, is saying that this is what the Holy Prophet said. This is what the Holy Prophet, your father said this. You would think that he would tell the person who it's related to first, if there was any such hadith. The Holy Lady replied with verses from Holy Quran. And she said that you claimed that the Holy Prophet of Islam said that the prophets don't leave behind inheritance, nor do they become inheritors. But the Holy Quran tells us a different story. The Holy Quran tells us that Sulaiman alayhi salam inherited from Dawood. And Sulaiman was a prophet, and Dawood was a prophet. So they both inherited. Dawood left behind inheritance and Sulaiman inherited it. Whereas you've said that prophets don't leave behind inheritance, nor do they inherit. Now when this ayah of Holy Quran is presented, the objection that some people might make is that this is referring to inheritance of prophethood and not inheritance of wealth or of worldly possessions. So for this, the Holy Lady has mentioned another verse of the Holy Quran. Another couple of verses, in fact. In Surah Al-Maryam, this is in Surah Al-Naml, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam. In Surah Al-Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the opening verses of Surah Al-Maryam, talks about Zakaria alayhi salam. And in this story, in this mention of Zakaria alayhi salam in the beginning of Surah Al-Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Zakaria had become very old and he had no children. Zakaria alayhi salam had become very old and he had no children. So he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, give me someone who will inherit from me. يَرِثُنِي وَيَرِثُ مِنْ آلِ Yaqub." Not only from me, but from all of Al Yaqub, all of the progeny of Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub, prophet. Yusuf, prophet. Ishaq, prophet. Zakaria, prophet. And the one whom he is asking for is also a prophet. But what gives it away that this, again you might say, well, this is about inheritance of prophethood. What gives it away is the verse that comes afterward. Zakaria prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, give me a son that might inherit from, not only from me, but from the whole of Al Yaqub. And I am fearful of my relatives. I am fearful of my relatives, of what they will do after I die. Now, as far as prophethood is concerned, and as far as knowledge is concerned, you can try as hard as you want. It's not something you can steal. It's not something that he has to be afraid of his relatives of. So it obviously means that it is something material and something physical, that he is fearful of his relatives taking it away. So when the Holy Lady mentions these verses, they come forward and they say, well, where are your witnesses? Where are your witnesses to prove that this belongs to you? Now there is a law, there is a principle within law, which exists in nearly every single legal system. I say nearly because obviously I don't know every single legal system, but nearly every single legal system, all the legal systems that I have happened to come across, this principle exists in all of them. And that is, possession is 9/10 of the law. It's very famous, I'm sure you've heard it before. Possession is 9/10 of the law. The Holy Lady Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha is in possession of Fadak. She doesn't need to bring witnesses. The people who are claiming that it doesn't belong to her and that it belongs to all Muslims have to bring their witnesses to prove that what they're saying is correct. The possession is already with Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. However, she is asked for witnesses. So she presents Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They say that we can't accept the testimony of children. They say we can't accept testimony of children. Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam are 7 and 8 years old respectively. They say we can't accept the testimony of children in this particular matter. It was only a few months prior. This takes place after the Holy Prophet has passed away. Only a few months prior that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had needed witnesses to defend His religion. An ayah of Holy Quran had come down. فَقُلْ تَعَالُوا نَدْعُوا أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. And every mufassir of Holy Quran, and we don't even need to go to mufassirin of Holy Quran. These are people who witnessed this firsthand. They saw what happened. They saw who went in the mubahala. So when this testimony of Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam just a few months ago was acceptable to defend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion and His tawheed, then what's the issue now? But when this too is rejected, Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha brings a very interesting witness. And historians have mentioned who this witness is, but I want to give you a little bit of background to this witness to realize the insight for bringing this particular person. Because there were other people that Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha could have brought. But why bringing this particular person? When the Holy Prophet of Islam was born, you will remember that his father had already passed away. When he was born, as inheritance from his father, he had received certain material goods, certain cattle. And amongst the things that he had inherited was a slave girl who was called Ayman. After the Holy Prophet passed away and she had been freed in the lifetime of the Holy Prophet of Islam, she continued to remain in the service of Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. The Holy Lady presented her as a witness. But when she was presented as a witness, she turned to the people on the other side. And she said to them, if I ask you something, will you verify what I say? So they said, what is it that you want us to verify? She says, did you hear the Holy Prophet of Islam say that the earth has not carried and the sun has not done shade upon a man more truthful than Abu Dhar and a woman more truthful than Ayman? When she asked them, they said, yes, we heard the Holy Prophet of Islam say this. We heard the Holy Prophet of Islam say this. Now Ayman says, then I'm telling you that this belongs to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha, because the Holy Prophet of Islam presented it to her in his own lifetime. So they said that the testimony is insufficient because Ali and Ayman are one man and one woman. So we need 2 men, or 1 man and 2 women. But indeed, Ayman, by asking this question, had ended the need for any more testimony. She had got 2 men to testify that what she was about to say was true. So their testimony for everything that she was about to say was already done. They had testified themselves. Thus their demand for witnesses in the first place was unjustified. But even then, Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha had made every single avenue of trying to make sure that this was presented correctly as complete. But there are certain other issues with this particular case. The first one is this, is that every single Muslim, judge, prosecutor, defendant, all owes a favor to Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. Why? Because this is the first case presented in the religion of Islam. If she had not presented her case, then we would never have known how do you present your case as far as Islamic law is concerned. So we all are in debt of her in order to find out how to present one's case in the Islamic court of law. The second problem is this, is that the state is a party in the case. So it does not have the right to be adjudicator because it's party of the case. The adjudicator has to be somebody else. However, what we see is that Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha is the defendant in the case, whereas the prosecutor and the adjudicator are one. Already, as far as legal independence is concerned, the case has been compromised. Because the adjudicator is not independent. The adjudicator is not somebody else, as it should be in every single legal system. And any legal expert will tell you that this is one of the most fundamental requirements of any kind of case, whatever it may happen to be. So this is the summary of the case itself. But what's the purpose on this in bringing this up as a matter? Because we might object, and certain people have objected, that surely Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wasalam were high above the fact that they would want something from the dunya. They would desire something from the dunya. So, why then does she ask for Fadak? Why does she ask for it? If this is something from the dunya, then Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam surely are high above that. The reality is, number one, as I've already mentioned, that we would never have known how to present a case in Islamic law if she had not presented her case. But secondly, it was imperative to put the record straight. Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha knew for certain that she was not going to receive Fadak back. But that was not the point. In fact, if we look at the sermon of Fadak, inshallah, you can go home and read it. Available in various languages as well. If we look at the sermon of Fadak, you see that in that sermon of Fadak, there is very little mention of the actual case of Fadak, the actual estate, the actual issue at hand. Instead, it's a wake-up call for Muslims. She says to them, have you forgotten what the Holy Prophet of Islam had said on the day of Ghadir? Have you forgotten all of these things that the Holy Prophet of Islam told you to do? And now that you are acting as if the Holy Prophet of Islam didn't tell you these things. Now you're acting as though The Holy Prophet of Islam left you behind no instructions on how to be guided. Then she says that Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam have been made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the love for them, as a basis for bringing the nation together and making them one. That if today there is a disunity in the nation, the solution's already been given. That we have made, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam as the way to bring the nation together, she says. And the implication is clear. The implication is very clear. That the fact that you abandoned Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam and followed your own desires as far as selecting your rulers is concerned means that you will always face obstacles and disunity in the nation. But this estate of Fadak, what happens afterwards? What happens at the conclusion of the case? The case is concluded. Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha delivers the sermon and she goes back home. So what is achieved from delivering the sermon? What is achieved from finding out about this estate of Fadak? What is achieved is that, number one, we know what is the legal positioning, what is the legal status of the estate of Fadak. Because when the case is presented, Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha demands Fadak on 3 grounds. This is very interesting. She demands it on 3 grounds. She says, number one, possession is 9/10 of the law. I am in possession of this, and the Holy Prophet of Islam in his lifetime gave it to me. So in response to that, one of the members of the government tore up the document which stated this. So Fatima Zahra alayhi salatu wasalam said that the second ground on which Fadak belongs to me is that of inheritance. Number one is that the Holy Prophet of Islam gave it to me in his own lifetime. And there are multiple witnesses present to confirm this. You yourselves were present there when this took place. But if you don't accept this, then on the grounds of inheritance, it also belongs to me. And then she says that even if you don't accept the grounds of inheritance, then on the grounds of khums it belongs to me. So on the grounds of ownership, on the grounds of inheritance, and on the grounds of khums, on these 3 counts, it belongs to Fatima Zahra Salamullah. So they were their tactic of saying that this hadith, this invented hadith is the wording is very interesting. It's very carefully worded. When they said that everything that the Holy Prophet leaves behind is sadaqah, because they knew that sadaqah is haram upon Ahlul Bayt. It's very well known that sadaqah is haram not only on Ahlul Bayt but on all of Bani Hashim. It is haram for them to receive sadaqah. So when they said that this is sadaqah, what they were trying to do was to make it haram upon them. Fatima Zahra alayhi salatu wasalam presented these 3 grounds for receiving it. But they rejected all of them. Neither did they accept the ownership, nor did they accept inheritance, nor did they accept the khums. And this is of course the case even today, where the aggressors are not interested in that they don't let the facts get in the way. Just like the various countries in the world today, where the occupation is much more subtle. That there is a country where the majority of those people are followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And the troops in that country, Bahrain, come from foreign lands. Occupation. You don't let the facts get in the way that the people who live there should be the ones who should determine their own destiny. The same goes for Palestine, the same goes for whatever country you'd like to pick. So nothing has changed. The oppressors still act in the same way, and the oppressed still bear the brunt of their consequences. So Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha, when she's delivered the sermon and it's completed, now what happens? Now what happens? But why did they not return it even after all of this evidence? This is answered many hundreds of years later by a very famous discussion, a conversation between a very famous scholar and his teacher. In the 7th century after Hijrah, so some 700 years later after this, lives a very prominent scholar by the name of Ibn Abil Hadid al-Mu'tazili. He is very well known for his voluminous work called Sharh Nahj al-Balagha, the commentary on Nahj al-Balagha. Interesting enough, even though he's written a commentary on Nahj al-Balagha, he does not belong to the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam. He is Mu'tazili, which is one of the famous theological schools from our brothers in faith. He has this conversation with his teacher, and he says to him, what I want to ask you is, in this case between the Khalifa and Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha, who was correct? Remember, this is a person who is not follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. He believes in this person as the Khalifa, as the rightful Khalifa. So he says, tell me, both of them, the teacher and the student. So he says, tell me who was correct in this particular case between Fatima Zahra and the Khalifa. So his teacher replies, surely Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha was correct. So he asks, he says, well then the question then is if Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha was correct, then why didn't the Khalifa give it back to her? Surely every single person is going to ask this question, that if Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha was correct in her claim for Fadak, then why didn't the Khalifa give it back to her? The teacher smiles. He says, there's one very important reason why he didn't give it back to her. He said, what is this reason? You're telling me that she was correct, and then still you're saying that there's a reason why he didn't give it back. He said, because the Khalifa knew what the pretext of this asking for Fadak was. He knew what the background to this was. He said, well, tell me what the background was. What was the reason? He says, Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha had not come to ask for an orchard or a piece of land. She had come to defend the right of her husband. And that if he had returned Fadak, then the next question would have been, now you've got to return the Khilafat to my husband who? And then he would have had no defense against that, because he had already accepted the truthfulness of Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. And for this reason, the Khalifa could not return Fadak. So Fadak, an orchard worth so much that it ran the empire for so long. Later on, in the time of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who's the Khalifa, comes to him and he says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, I want to return the Fadak to you. This too is an interesting turn of history. That those people had vehemently denied the right of Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha to Fadak. Later on, people, by saying we want to give it back, proved that it didn't belong to them. Their actions told us that it didn't belong to them. Otherwise, why would they say we want to give it back? Otherwise, they would say it always belonged to us and we were rightfully its owners. But their actions said, no, we know it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to them. So they offered it back. Then later on, even after that, Ma'mun al-Rashid calls upon Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. And he says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I want to give Fadak back. Tell me the borders of Fadak. So the Imam alayhi salatu salam tells him the borders. When he hears this, he says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, this is my whole kingdom. He says, this is my whole kingdom. The Imam says, how do you think the kingdom's been running all these years? On what wealth was the kingdom running for all these years? That it was the fact that you had usurped Fadak, which meant that up until then, so many hundreds of years later, the kingdom was still running. The empire still ran. The Khilafat still had enough to pay for a standing army. So Fadak, an orchard, a piece of land, but so much more than that. So much more than that. That behind it was hidden the agenda of the Khilafat. And its defense was actually the defense of the right of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam. And that whenever it came to the defense of Imamat, it was always a member of this family who stood and defended that right. Always. Whether it was Fatima Zahra who did it in Medina, or it was Zainab alayhi salam who did it in Kufa and Sham. It was the same defense for the same cause, just in different places. The same defense for the same cause, different places. Just as Fatima Zahra had stood in the court in Medina to defend her husband's right, Zainab alayhi salam stood in the court of Yazid to defend the religion of Islam and her brother's right. बस अज़ीज़ान मोहतरम, मजलिस का वक्त तमाम हो गया है. चंद जुमले मसाइब के. फ़ातिमा ज़हरा के फ़ज़ाइल में आपने कुछ मेरे टूटे फूटे अल्फाज सुने. और फ़ातिमा ज़हरा की बेटी हैं ज़ैनब, और ज़ैनब के बेटे हैं ओनो मोहम्मद. मोहसिन नकवी शहीद कहते हैं कि ये अलग बात है कि महफूज रहा दीन नबी. ये अलग बात है कि महफूज रहा दीन नबी. ये अलग बात है कि लूटा गया घर ज़ैनब का. ये अलग बात है कि महफूज रहा दीन नबी. ये अलग बात है कि लूटा गया घर ज़ैनब का. अजीज़ों, करबला में हर एक की कुर्बानी का अपना अपना मकाम है, मगर अगर किसी ने नस्ल की कुर्बानी दे दी तो ज़ैनब कुबरा ने दी है. अगर किसी ने नस्ल की कुर्बानी दे दी तो वो ज़ैनब कुबरा ने दी है करबला में. बस अजीज़ों, रवायत में ये मिलता है कि जब मौला हुसैन करबला से मदीना से चल रहे थे करबला के लिए, तो ओनो मोहम्मद साथ नहीं थे. जब आपने आ करके مکے میں قیام کیا تو حضرت عبداللہ ابن جعفر جناب زینب کے شوہر نامدار حج کے لیے تشریف لائے اور ان کے ساتھ تھے اون و محمد۔ جب امام سے ملنے آئے تو جناب زینب کو یہ خبر ملی کہ حضرت عبداللہ ابن جعفر آئے ہیں۔ شریعت کے ہر حکم کے جاننے والی زینب ہیں، ان کو یہ معلوم ہے کہ اگر ان کے شوہر نے منع کر دیا تو وہ یہ سفر نہ اختیار کر سکیں گی تو بہت پریشان ہیں۔ حضرت عبداللہ مولا کی خدمت میں تشریف لاتے ہیں اور زینب کبریٰ کو تسلی دیتے ہیں کہ میں آپ کو روکنے نہیں آیا، میں آپ کو کوئی مشورہ دینے نہیں آیا ہوں، آپ امام وقت ہیں، بس میں صرف اس لیے آیا ہوں کہ اگر آپ پہ کوئی مصیبت کا وقت پڑے تو اون کو میری طرف سے اور محمد کو زینب کی طرف سے اپنے اوپر قربان کر لیجئے گا۔ بس عزیزو، اون محمد حسین کے ساتھ ہو گئے۔ عاشورے کی رات کو یہ منظر دیکھا گیا کہ مولا ہر خیمے سے گزرتے تھے اور یہ منظر دیکھتے تھے کہ ہر ماں اپنے بیٹوں کے ساتھ بیٹھی ہے اور اسے کس انداز میں سمجھا رہی ہے کہ کل شہادت کا دن ہے، مرنے کا دن ہے، اور ہر ماں یہ کہتی ہے تو زینب کبریٰ کیوں نہ کہتی؟ زینب کبریٰ کہہ رہی ہیں اپنے بیٹوں سے کہ یہ خیال رہے کہ جب لڑائی شروع ہو تو تم دونوں سب سے پہلے ہونا میدان کے اندر، تم دونوں سب سے پہلے میدان میں ہونا، اور اس بات کا بھی خیال رکھو کہ دریا کی طرف نظر بھی نہیں کرنا ہے، جب تک کہ تمہارے ماموں حسین پیاسے ہیں تب تک کہ دریا کی طرف نظر بھی نہیں کرنی ہے۔ بس عزیزو، عاشورے کا دن نمودار ہو گیا اور کافی شہید ہو گئے، لاشیں آنے لگے۔ زینب کبریٰ نے دیکھا کہ میرے بیٹے کہاں ہیں، دیکھا تو کیا دیکھا کہ ابھی بیٹے زندہ ہیں۔ جلال میں آ گئیں، کہنے لگیں کیا میں نے جو تمہیں کل کہا تھا وہ تم بھول گئے؟ لاشیں آنا شروع ہو گئے ہیں اور تم ابھی تک زندہ ہو۔ تو ہاتھ جوڑ کے کہتے ہیں کہ اماں ہم تو جانا چاہتے ہیں لیکن مامو جان اجازت نہیں دیتے، مامو جان ہمیں جانے کی اجازت نہیں دیتے۔ بس عزیزو، مولا حسین کی خدمت میں جناب زینب تشریف لائیں اور کہنے لگیں کہ بھیا حسین کیا میں نے آپ سے کچھ مانگا ہے اور آپ نے اسے رد کیا ہے؟ کیا کبھی ایسا ہوا ہے؟ مولا فرماتے ہیں کہ ایسا نہیں ہوا ہے۔ کہا بس میں آخری بار مانگتی ہوں، بس آخری بار چاہتی ہوں کہ میرے بچوں کو رن کی اجازت دے دیجئے، میرے بچوں کو میدان میں جانے دیجئے۔ مولا حسین کہتے ہیں مگر زینب، انہیں میں مرنے کی اجازت کیسے دے دوں؟ میں کیسے ان کو مرنے کی اجازت دے دوں؟ اگر کہ ان کے بابا اس پر راضی نہ ہوئے تو کیا ہوگا؟ زینب کہنے لگیں کیا آپ بھول گئے کہ ان کے بابا ہی انہیں آپ کے حوالے کر گئے تھے اور یہ کہہ گئے تھے کہ اون کو میری طرف سے اور محمد کو زینب کی طرف سے۔ بس اب مولا حسین نے رن کی اجازت دی۔ عزیزوں، مقاتل میں یہ ملتا ہے کہ جب اون و محمد کو تیار کر دیا گیا، ابھی تابوت برآمد ہوگا تو آپ دیکھیں گے کہ چھوٹے چھوٹے امامے جب سر پہ رکھ دیے گئے اور جنگ کے لیے تیار کر دیا گیا تو روایت یہ کہتی ہے کہ اون و محمد اتنے چھوٹے تھے کہ پاؤں رکاب تک نہیں پہنچتا تھا۔ اون و محمد اتنے چھوٹے تھے کہ پاؤں رکاب تک نہیں پہنچتا تھا۔ میدان میں گئے، عمر سعد نے ان کو آتے دیکھ کے حیرت کا اظہار کیا، کہنے لگا کیا عجب محبت ہے زینب کو حسین سے کہ اپنے بیٹوں کو مرنے کے لیے بھیج دیا ہے۔ بس عزیزو شہادت نہیں پڑھ رہا ہوں، ایک جملے کی زحمت دے رہا ہوں، ایک جملے کی زحمت۔ جب قافلہ مدینے پہنچ گیا تو بہت دن گزر گئے اور جناب زینب ابھی گھر نہیں آئی تھی۔ سید سجاد کے پاس حضرت عبداللہ ابن جعفر آئے، کہنے لگے کہ مولا یا ابن رسول اللہ آپ امام ہیں، اپنی پھوپھی زینب سے کہیے کہ کبھی اس گھر میں بھی تشریف لایا ہے، یہ بھی انہی کا گھر ہے۔ عزیزو سید سجاد نے کہا کہ ٹھیک ہے میں کہتا ہوں۔ کہا پھوپھی اماں عبداللہ ابن جعفر یہ گزارش کرتے ہیں، یہ خواہش کرتے ہیں کہ کبھی آپ گھر میں بھی تشریف لائیں، کبھی آپ گھر میں بھی تشریف لائیں۔ بس عزیزو زینب کبریٰ حکم امام ہے تعمیل میں تشریف لے گئیں۔ اب یہ خیال رہے کہ زینب کبریٰ نے اون محمد پہ نہ کربلا میں ماتم کیا تھا، نہ کوفے میں ماتم کیا تھا، نہ شام میں ماتم کیا تھا۔ اب جب گھر میں تشریف لائیں، نظر آئے وہ دو چھوٹے چھوٹے بستر، وہ دو ننھے ننھے مسلح، تو اب دل کھول کے زینب رونے لگی۔ روتے روتے عبداللہ نے روکا، کہا شہزادی یہ تو بتائیے، شہزادی یہ تو بتائیے۔ زینب کہنے لگی کیا آپ یہ پوچھیں گے کہ آپ کے بیٹے کیسے لڑے؟ آپ کیا یہ پوچھیں گے کہ آپ کے بیٹے کیسے لڑے؟ عبداللہ کہنے لگے نہیں، زینب مجھے یہ سناؤ کہ میرا حسین کیسے لڑا۔ زینب یہ تو ذرا بتاؤ کہ میرا حسین کیسے لڑا۔ عزیزو زینب کبریٰ نے مولا حسین کی جنگ بیان کرنا شروع کی، زینب نے مولا حسین کی جنگ بیان کرنا شروع کی۔ کہنے لگیں کہ عاشورے کا دن آدھا گزر چکا تھا، عصر کا وقت آ گیا تھا، سب لوگ شہید ہو چکے تھے، مگر مولا حسین خیمے سے نکلے، کمر کو کس کے سیدھا کیا، گھوڑے پر سوار ہوئے، میدان میں گئے، اور جو پہلا حملہ کیا تو فوج یزید بھاگتی ہوئی پیچھے گئی اور کہنے لگے اب اس کی لڑائی دیکھو۔ مولا حسین کہنے لگے، کیا کہنے لگے جس کا ایک مر جاتا ہے اس سے کھڑا نہیں ہوا جاتا، جس کا ایک مر جاتا ہے اس سے کھڑا نہیں ہوا جاتا، میرے 72 مر گئے ہیں، اب میری لڑائی دیکھو، اب میری لڑائی دیکھو۔ زینب کبریٰ کہنے لگی، پھر مولا حسین علی اکبر کے جنازے پہ پہنچے، علی اکبر کے لاشے پہ پہنچے اور کہنے لگے علی اکبر کیا تم نے دیکھا تمہارا بابا کیسے لڑا؟ فوج سے کہنے لگے اس کی لڑائی دیکھو جس کا جوان مارا گیا ہے۔ پھر فرات کے کنارے آئے، کہنے لگے عباس تمہیں جانے کی بڑی جلدی تھی، اگر تم زندہ ہوتے تو ہم تم مل کے لڑتے۔ فوج سے کہنے لگے اس کی لڑائی دیکھو جس کی کمر شکستہ ہو گئی، جس کا سہارا جوان بھائی مارا گیا۔ الا ولعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین وسيعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون۔ اٹھ کھڑے ہوئیے، تابوت اون محمد کا آ رہا ہے، استقبال کیجئے، جناب زینب کو اپنے بیٹوں کا پرسہ دیجئے۔